As a child, I used to hate terribly when my supposed peers would invoke the law of finders keepers on me. I'd have a brand new pencil, and perhaps it would be left on my desk, and then I would see it in the possession of someone else. I'd get their attention, and they'd say to me, "Finders keepers, Harry." And it was such a weird feeling, seeing something that belonged to me in somebody else's possession. Am I alone in feeling that's such a awkward feeling? To have something that belongs to you used by somebody else without you giving permission? I want to share with you, and of course it comes in bold print, just so as a disclaimer, this does not constitute legal advice. So what I'm going to share with you is not legal advice, all right? So don't go to your lawyers or anything like that. This is taken from the website lifeofthelaw.org. It is titled TDNCLA, this does not constitute legal advice, How True is Finders Keepers. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'll read part of it to you. Dear TDNCLA, this is like a Dear Abby kind of article. I'm a straight-up kleptomaniac, but I'm thinking I may have found a solution. I've become really good at finding things recently. Like that time I found a wallet in my best friend's pocket, and that time I found $500 in my boyfriend's sock that he keeps buried in his kitchen drawer. I'm thinking I don't need to go see a therapist anymore and can just stick to my good fortune as a finder. Do you agree? Signed, Klepto in Recovery. And you have to see this picture too. I think it's bold enough. There's a picture of the astronaut planting the American flag on the moon, and below it says Finders Keepers. Dear Klepto in Recovery, Finders Keepers, Losers Weepers is more than just a children's taunt, like "nana nana poo poo" or "your mom is so fat." It's the law. Yes, dating back to the time when valuable possessions in life were fox carcasses. True, some law school classes devote a lot of time to the property rights of two hunters who found a dead fox in the woods. The law has had something to say about lost and found. I'm not suggesting you start digging around your house for treasure. I mean, sure, you could one day learn that you sold a house that was literally a gold mine, and it was your sheer laziness and attachment to your gardenias that kept you from living like a mogul. But you should know when, in fact, it's okay for you to find something and keep it. Anyone who has ever thrown a party knows the joys, or responsibility, that comes with waking up the next day and finding a bunch of things that people forgot to take with them. A sweater, a scarf, an iPhone, dollar bills, a photo ID. Naturally, you are tempted to email your party attendants and ask if anyone forgot anything other than their dignity. But before you do, just think, you are already probably thinking this can all be mine. And it can, provided you honestly don't know what is whose, the property has been lost, and you're suddenly a lot warmer for winter and have a great data plan. But here's the rub. There is a fine, razor-thin line between finding and straight-up stealing. Property is not lost when you reach into my pocket and take it from me without my noticing. And it isn't lost when someone with a second-grade degree can figure out who the true owner is. Mine hangs proudly on my office wall. Take the case of the iPhone. Are you really going to be able to avoid figuring out whose phone is now in your possession when the welcome screen says Topanga's phone, heart, heart, heart? And much as you may want to keep the photo ID in case you ever need to flee the country under a false identity, you can't really get around the fact that you know who it belongs to. Although as a fugitive, petty larceny may be the least of your worries. But with less personalized goods like umbrellas and outerwear and cold hard cash, your only responsibility is to reasonably try and find out who it belongs to. Fortunately, what's reasonable is really a fairly squishy idea. I think it's perfectly reasonable to email your attendees in the dead of night when they're less likely to notice. Perfectly reasonable to use addresses at hotmail.com that are likely long expired. Incredibly reasonable to write the email in Klingon font. The law also makes a distinction between lost and mislaid property. Lost property is stuff that the loser, in the legal sense, is never likely to see again. Maybe you found something on the side of the highway when you pulled over to relieve yourself. But we all, especially the absent-minded among us, occasionally put stuff down, forget about it, and then immediately remember and go back for it. Flaky people deserve property rights too, and the law protects us flakes. It generally does not allow the finder to keep the property, but rather the owner of the location that the property was misplaced. This makes sense, since that's probably the first place you're headed to once you remember where you mislaid your possession. Finders, keepers. There was a time in the scriptures where a lot of different types of people came together to listen to Jesus speak. You had the publicans, or the tax collectors, who were a special brand of sinner that had their own category. Then you had the sinner, a little bit further up along the hierarchy. Then you had the Pharisees and the scribes. All of them were present together. Now, with such a wide diversity of an audience, what was Jesus going to do to reach all of them? Well, the Bible says he told them a parable. And it says in Luke 15, verse 3, Jesus told them this parable, but then when you read the whole chapter, he launches into 3. And we're going to look at all 3 because they have to be seen as a whole, not just one at a time, because he's dealing with different people in his audience. Okay? And he's dealing with this concept of finders keepers. At least that's what I titled the message for today. So it says Jesus told them this parable. Suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Doesn't he leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and goes home? Then he calls his friends and neighbors together and says, "Rejoice with me, I have found my lost sheep." I tell you that in the same way, there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who do not need to repent. Alright, so the Pharisees and scribes, I'll single them out for this particular parable because they're the ones who are the experts in law. They are the ones who are most diligent in keeping it. So they're going to have a stock of sheep close by because those are the ones who are going to be sacrificed. Those are the ones who they're going to bring to the temple and do follow the letter of the law and doing all that is required. And so he appeals to them. Suppose you lose one of them. I understand that. Yeah, we'd have to go find him. We'd have to go find him. I remember when our dog, our husky, was a puppy. He didn't stay puppy-sized very long, but he hated to obey me. He thought everything I tried to do was a game. And if he ever got loose, my advances towards him were an invitation for him to play, and he'd run in the opposite direction. And one time he got loose. Now, of all everybody in our household, in our family, is animal lovers. Are animal lovers, except for one person. That person happens to be me. I do have, there is an affection that's growing in me for them, but I do not have this kind of buddy-buddy love and they know it. But guess who ends up having to chase after the animal? It's me. And the animal knows I love him the least. So I'm running after him all over Grand Forks because I don't want to face the disappointed looks of my children and my wife, and I'm the one chasing after this animal. Because I can't bear to lose him. Even though I may not, okay, I have to admit, I do like him. But you know how I caught him? I waited till he had to relieve himself, and I tackled him. And I literally picked him up and I carried him home. Do you realize we have cats in our home too, but I don't have any stories about them like I have for my dog. I never had to tackle any of them. Or I'd be bearing scars for the rest of my life if I tried to tackle any of them. But I can tell you this story about my dog because he's the one who ran off. And I have a story that I can share because he's the one who ran off. He was the one who I didn't want to lose because he was no longer at home. And here's this sheep, singled out. Why? Because he's the one who's lost. He's not worth more than the others. But he's the one I celebrate. He's the one the shepherd celebrates when he brings him back. Why? Because he was the one who was lost. And they boast. He boasts about the story about how he found him, how he picked him up, how he carried him home. Why is so much energy and effort placed upon this one? Because this was the one that was lost. Why am I telling you the story about my dog? Because I don't have a story about my cats. They're still at home. Their place is secure. Yeah, right. Yeah. Their place is secure. I don't have stories like that for them because they never ran off. But I have a story about my dog because he's not the one. He's the one. He's the one who ran off. So perhaps maybe as an introductory, this one is tugging at the heartstrings of the scribes and Pharisees because they have a stock of sheep that they use for sacrifices and maybe other animals as well too. But these aren't the only people in the audience. There are more. There are others. So he leads them towards their sense of accomplishment at finding the one that was lost, and they can jive with that. They can relate to that. And he says that's exactly what it's like in the kingdom of heaven when a sinner comes to repent. Everybody's partying. Everybody's excited. They're not excited about the ones who are already there. They're excited about the ones who are finally come home. The ones who have been found. This is how it begins. Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathered around to hear Jesus, but the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." And that's when Jesus decided to tell a parable. And so, one by one, he's plucking their heartstrings, getting them to see, capture a picture in their mind, something that they can relate to. Is it beginning to touch your words? Verse 8, or suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and loses one. Doesn't she light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? And when she finds it, she calls her friends and neighbors together and says, "Rejoice with me, I have found my lost coin." In the same way, I tell you, there is rejoicing in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents. Now, there's one thing the tax collectors can understand. Jesus started talking in their language. He started talking money. And they're the ones who, they collect it, but they don't, they take some of it for themselves, but a great portion of it, they are responsible for returning to the government. There is a story that happened midway through April. 6-year-old boy by the name of Jasper and his father Eric were walking along the street when Jasper, the 6-year-old boy, spied with his 2 eyes a little bag by the side of the road. He pointed it out to his father, who then went, unzipped the zipper, and they found $2,000 cash in there, along with deposit receipts. This was money that belonged to a restaurant. And the person in charge of bringing the money to the bank lost the bag. Now, $2,000 is a lot for a little shop, for a little restaurant. And so instead of keeping the money for themselves, they took it to the police station. And the money was reunited with its owner. And I find it interesting, they did not invoke the law, finders, keepers in this sense. They could have easily kept the money. And there's a nice photograph of city officials giving Jasper an award for good citizenship, and that commending the father for teaching his son a valuable lesson. That when you find something like this, it doesn't mean you become the new owner. It means we have to return it to its owner, rightful owner. So now they have a story to tell. Just like this woman has a story to tell. She swept, she overturned everything just to find that one piece that was missing. Just to find the one piece that was missing. Or how many of you have misplaced your phone? And you're begging everybody else in the household, call my number, call my number. We had to do that just this week. The phone was misplaced and I called the number. Oh, okay, I found it. I mean, all of a sudden, all the priorities zoom in on finding that one piece of communication, and then when it's found, breathe a collective sigh of relief. Yeah. When I was in Grand Forks, we had a visitor that would come to church on a regular basis. She was impressed with our church service and had started forming relationships with the church family. And I remember lingering with a group after potluck, and she came to me in a panic, stating that I lost my earrings. They were valuable. And you could see that her annoyance was turning into panic, turning into, I don't know if I ever want to come here ever again. Because she was almost hinting at as though somebody had stolen. So I gathered everybody together in a circle, right there in the sanctuary. There was maybe 9, 10 of us left in the church after potluck. And we prayed together. Lord, help us find what is lost. And then like the woman in this house, we started going through the entire church. You know, I've been told the church is like a big house. And so that's what we did. A group went to the fellowship hall, a group stayed in the sanctuary, a group stayed out in the foyer, and the next 15, 20 minutes, we were furiously going through the whole church, trying to find a pair of earrings. And then, I thought to myself, Lord, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And I remember, we have a pew out near the entrance, and I sat down on the pew, hung my head down, and asked the Lord for more help. And as I hung my head down, there were the earrings. Right underneath where I was sitting. Right there. And I picked them up, gathered everybody around, and said, we have to pray. The Lord answered our prayers. There is rejoicing in the kingdom of heaven over one sinner who repents. They're like the lost coin. They're like the lost iPhone. They're like the lost pair of earrings. Valuable. More. I mean, how much valuable? When you're talking about a sinner who repents, who paid for that sinner? Who died for that sinner? Jesus did. Yes. And they throw a big party when one of them comes home. When one of them is found. All right, so now we plucked at the heartstrings of the Pharisees and the scribes with the sheep. Then Jesus has plucked on the heartstrings of the tax collectors and sinners with the story of the coin, a material possession. How is he going to unite the two of them together now? This is where he comes to the longest parable in this trilogy. One that captures an incredible picture of the love of God. Jesus continued. That's how verse 11 goes. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his field to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quick! Bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate, for this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing, so he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. 'Your brother has come,' he replied, 'and your father has killed a fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound.' The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him, but he answered his father, 'Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders, yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him?' 'My son,' the father said, 'you are always with me and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' And in one sweeping picture, he envelops the tax collectors, the sinners, the scribes, and the Pharisees. He lumps them all together as one big family, calling the tax collectors and sinners the younger brother who have squandered their lives. And here they are, clamoring to get the closest place to listen to everything that is coming out of Jesus' mouth. The scribes and the Pharisees are complaining. Why? Because they have diligently followed the letter of the law year after year after year after year. And they're wondering why. For what purpose? What's the end result? Where's the party for you? And Jesus describes it. He describes it in vivid detail. Those who squander their living and they hire themselves out to others who abuse them, who invoke the law of finders, keepers, and don't want to give them back. He comes to his senses and he says, "No, look at what I've missed. Look at what God is really like. What is my Father really like? Even the servants are happy." And so he separates himself from the owner of the pigs, and he makes his way back home with his speech in his mind that he's rehearsed. He wants to be back. He wants to be back. But his father sees him far away off, runs towards him, embraces him. They kill the fattened calf, have a party. And the older son who's working in the field, the one who are characterized by, or the ones who the scribes and the Pharisees can most relate to, starts complaining. And the father goes out to address his older son. And he says something very, very important. Your son, your younger brother was lost. He was lost to us. He was no longer part of the family, but now he's back. He is found. It is right that we should party. It is right that we should celebrate. And then the older son throws in his face, "You never did anything. You never threw a party for me and my friends." But missed a very important observation, and something that I discovered as a kid growing up. Well, I didn't discover it when I was a kid. I look back and I see that I was the recipient of the same thing. The father said to the older son, "Everything I have is yours. You have lacked for nothing." And I look back, and I may not have much now, but I remember living at home, and my dad had a huge stable of vehicles, old vehicles in various states of repair. I never lacked for a car to drive. Everything that was his, I had access to. He may have had control over everything in the home, but he was generous with everything in the home. His cars were my cars. His electronics were my electronics. I mean, all of his toys. Oh, sure, he complained when we got our hands on his toys. But we had so much, and he withheld very little. How much more the Father in the story? When we have a secure place within the family of God, everything he has is ours. If we just realize how much power, how much resources we have access to as children of God. And when one decides to go it alone, and find that when you take from God and spend it on your own thing, guess what happens to those resources? They exhaust, they dwindle, they die off. When you remain attached to God, the resources never dry out. And so he's drawing this picture that the tax collectors, the sinners, the Pharisees, and scribes are all part of the same family, with a loving God who takes care of them. And we have all those types. In every family we have those types. Even in this church family here, we have those types. And we got the scribe and the Pharisee type grumbling over the publican and sinner type. When we have to learn that it is the same Father, our Father in heaven, who calls us together. And that when a sinner comes home, it is time to celebrate, not time to censure. It is time to welcome them home. Sure, for all of you who have remained in the family for generations, yeah, we may not have a party for you for staying here in the church for so long, for sticking it out. But you've missed it. The point is to celebrate when somebody who has discovered the harshness of the world and how much sin costs, who's desperate to come back to find a place here, that it is time to celebrate when they come home. Time to celebrate. Like, even the angels. Do you realize the angels never have a story that we have because they've never fallen? But yet they're always in a supportive role. They're always behind the scenes. No wonder they remain invisible. They remain invisible, yet they help us out, and then they celebrate with us, and they have no story to tell of how they've fallen. Because they've never fallen. Yet they participate with us. And those who have discovered Jesus have a responsibility, like the angels, as ministering spirits, for those who have not yet found him.